Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Keith Smith here. Follow him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. I'm Trevor Lane. Follow me at Trevor_Lane. A lot going on in the world of the NBA. Keith, we had our debut of our morning wrap-up show, still to be named, earlier today. And now we get to dive into some of the news topics, including, I think, some pretty important stuff today.
Yeah, I agree. Considering it's the eve of the season when a lot of this news was yesterday for the vast majority of the league, there was some pretty big stuff that came out. So I'm excited to dive into it, and it's important stuff too. I think we got one guy wants to stay, and one guy really doesn't
Really
want to
does
stay
not.
where he is anymore. Let's start with the guy who wants to
And
stay.
we're not talking
Damian
about Ben
Lillard.
Simmons. Like that's the crazy thing.
There's no Simmons siren. There's no Kyrie news or anything like that. It's neither one of those two guys. They're not going to feature in today's show.
Yeah, instead it's Damian Lillard. Before we can even come up with an alliterative term for Damian Lillard news, he comes right out, says I'm not leaving. I'm staying in Portland. Which is kind of true to his character. That's what we've seen from him all along, is he didn't want to leave, even as other people were saying he should go. I think he wanted to put some pressure on the Portland front office to make some moves, to do some things. But I mean, he's coming right out and saying, "Yeah, I'm not going anywhere."
Yeah, and it was kind of cool. There was a story, I want to say it was about a month ago, where it was right around the start of training camps, when Chauncey Billups came out and said, "Look, I'm not going to tell him he should stay here and he should not want to go anywhere and those kind of things. I'm not going to do that. It's not, my job is not that. My job is to coach him, to support him, and all those things." And then we had Dame basically say it was talking with Chauncey Billups without getting that kind of pressure that helped influence him. And he said, I came away with the impression of this is, I'm very much paraphrasing here, but this is going to be hard. There's going to be bumps in the road, but this is where I want to be. I want to get it done in Portland. And for my money, I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like I love that he is 100% committed to the Blazers and doesn't want to go anywhere else. And I want to see Damian Lillard get a championship, of course, but we go too far with the rings mean everything sometimes. And I get it, because otherwise it's going to be Damian Lillard is a top, I don't know what, 25 player in NBA history or something like that, maybe by the end of his career, but he never won a ring. Like it's always that comma but that gets added when a guy doesn't win a ring. So I don't have a problem when guys do what they do to go get one. Kevin Durant joining the Warriors because he eliminated that after the comma part of it. That doesn't exist anymore for him. So I do think it's really cool that he's apparently good to stay in Portland for the long haul. And that's good for the league to have a smaller market franchise keeping a homegrown star there for at least, let's say, the vast majority of his career at this point.
It's bad for the league and good for the league at the same time, right? Because let's face it, the transactions, that's what gets a lot of buzz around the NBA.
Oh, sure.
Like if Damian Lillard said, I'm not sure exactly what my future is going to hold or something to that effect, the news cycle for the next year would be just filled with Lillard drama, and there'd be all kinds of interest and all of that. And Lillard has shut all of that down. But on the flip side, you still have the small market teams that are saying over and over and over again that it's not fair. The system is tilted against them and things of that nature. Now you've got something you can point to. You can say, look, if you do it right, if you build a relationship with your star player, you can get them to stay. Everybody is different. Everybody's an individual. Some guys will make the choice to leave. Some will stay. But you can't say nobody ends up staying with a small market team because Lillard is making this decision. So that helps. Yep. And let me ask you this, Keith. Let's say that Lillard plays out the remainder of his career in Portland, however long that is, right? If it's 10 more years, if it's 4 more years, whatever it is, he plays out the remainder of his career in Portland, plays at a high level, eventually tailors off, never wins a title. Is he, you mentioned maybe top 25, is he the greatest trailblazer ever?
Yeah, if he's like another 4 or 5 years there, even if he plays out the rest of this contract at the level he's been at, with very little slippage. Yeah, I think so. I think so, because we got to go back to, they've won one title, I believe, in franchise history, and that was back with Bill Walton. But no one from that team is the greatest trailblazer ever because Bill Walton got hurt and it just there wasn't that longevity. So it's got to be between Damian Lillard and Clyde
Right.
Drexler. And Drexler didn't get it done in Portland either. And oddly enough, he moved on to another franchise and then did get it done in Houston. But yeah, I think so. I mean, he may be there already. I'm
He might be,
curious
yeah.
if you're a Portland fan, shout it out in the comments of the show and let us know what you think because I'm very curious to see what you think on that. If you're a Portland fan of, is he the best Trailblazer ever? He might already be there.
Now, domino effect. We said that we wouldn't talk about him today, but nothing in the NBA happens in a vacuum. And one of the players that the 76ers were believed to be holding out for on a Ben Simmons trade.
Not sounding the siren.
Don't sound the siren. But this is one of the names that's out there. It's Lillard and Beal.
Sure.
The 76ers are basically trying to stall until one of them comes on the market. Now you've got the player himself saying, I'm not on the market. I'm staying here. Bradley Beal seems to really like Washington. And there's been no sign that he's leaving the Wizards. I mean, it seems like Beal feels about the Wizards kind of the way Lillard feels about the Blazers. Might this have an impact on the Simmons conversations in terms of a trade? I, again, can't say for sure, total speculation, but again, nothing happens in a vacuum in the NBA.
Yeah, no, that's I would be lying if I said I didn't immediately have thoughts about that myself. Is if you're Philly, do you move off your ask? Because now you've had Lillard say he doesn't want to go anywhere, and Beal has said that since the start of the season at the beginning of media day. Both of them have confirmed they want to be right where they are. So if that continues to remain the same, there'll be somebody else, right? We just know how this works. Someone else will become the next guy who wants out of where they are. But yeah, I think we're at a position with these two where they're off the table. And if I'm Philly, I'm not taking a bad deal because you're not going to make a bad deal. But I said this before when we talked about Simmons, it's time to just move on, get rid of the distraction, addition by subtraction, move on, go, and off we go. But I don't think it's going to change anything because I think they've dug in. They're locked into. We're not moving them unless we get blown away with some great offer with a star player back or a million draft picks or whatever it is, and I don't think that's coming. So as we wait.
All right, let's jump from a player who wants to stay to a player who does not. And Keith, you and I were talking before we hit record here. Never seen this happen before. This is from Jeff Schwartz of XL Sports. They put this out from their company account. I'm just going to read it. Sacramento.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
It's crazy.
Laughing over you just because it's so crazy.
It is.
But I'm going to go on mute because I'm going to continue to laugh.
Okay.
So I'll mute while you get through.
Okay, so this is it. And everybody, again, this is not made up. This is real. And this is coming from an agent and an agency from the company account. This is not a burner account. Here's what it says. Sacramento has informed Marvin Bagley he is not in the opening night rotation, which is completely baffling. It's clear they have no plans for him in the future and yet passed on potential deals at last year's deadline and this summer based on, quote, value. Instead, they chose to bring him back but not play him, a move completely contradictory to their value argument. This is a case study in mismanagement by the Kings organization. And I can see Keith laughing as I'm saying all of this. This is, I mean, I put this in our show notes as Marvin Bagley scorched earth policy here, right? Like he is burning all of the bridges. This is the nuclear option, right? The agency, not just saying they're not playing him, not just saying we wish they would play him, but taking a shot at the Kings organization and saying it's mismanagement. Oh my goodness. Like what, I don't know where this goes, but this is more player movement drama here for the NBA.
Well, and this is on not the exact heels, but this is a guy whose dad tweeted at the team account and said, trade my son.
Yeah.
Like now I imagine somewhere a Kings fan woke up and said, meh, it's Tuesday.
Yeah,
and they were just like, that's how these things go for us. But it's not funny, but it's just so over the top.
Yes, that's it.
Like that's why I can't help but laugh at it because it's really like these are the kind of things that like you and I text to each
Yeah.
other, like, what a bunch of idiots. They need to do this, or this guy's being a childish baby, or those kind of things. Like outside of like blatant name calling here, like, and being like, you're a poopy head. Like it's, this is as close to like that is where probably ever going to get. I've never seen anything like
No.
this. Even going back to, I mean, Anthony Davis, Ben Simmons, like a handful of other guys, we've seen them be like, look, it's just not working out here. The
Mm-hmm.
player's not happy, those kind of things. But this is full on saying like, look, you blew it. You're awful. And like, you're refusing to trade my guy. And I've never seen anything like that.
There's a common theme here that we're seeing now, and we're starting to see this happen more often where a player and a player's agent slash agency is put into a contentious situation with the organization publicly, right? Where it feels like it's agency versus franchise versus organization. And I do wonder how that ultimately will bleed into negotiations in the future and CBA and all that sort of stuff. But just drilling down to look at this specific situation, I mean, look, if they really are just completely benching Marvin Bagley, who again was their number 2 pick just a couple of seasons ago, when everybody around him is kind of blown up, that's not a good look, especially if they had opportunities to move him. Like now his value, whatever they could have got for him during the summer, that's probably gone. His value is completely blown apart at this point if you're going to make the decision to bench him. So if you're the Kings and you had planned to just sit him on the bench, why didn't you just trade him in the summer? So I could get why Marvin Bagley himself, why his agency would be upset by that turn of events.
Yeah, absolutely. And I made the point on Twitter after all this, after, getting off some jokes and laughing about it, of he's a good second draft
Yeah,
candidate
absolutely.
for a team that either they're already good and they can just kind of whatever we get from them, or they're bad and they can really invest in playing him. But I think the challenge is, how do you get the Kings to play ball?
Yeah.
Because you clearly aren't going to give up a lot for him, but yet the Kings don't seem to really want to trade. It just, this one's weird because this is not a Ben Simmons situation where that's an established all NBA level talent. So you can understand why Philly is saying, hey, we need a good return for this guy, even if it's a mess. Like, we still need a good return. Bagley has shown flashes at times of being a good player, but that's all it is. It's just flashes. So you're not going to give up a lot for that, because then let's say you get him and he breaks out. Now you have to pay him.
Mm-hmm.
So that starts to become a whole thing. And then part of that decision-making process is, all right, is it real? Like, did he really break out? Or is this a situation where now we're having to pay a guy, or was he just motivated because he was mad? Where you've got to feel really confident in your ability to parse through that, because otherwise it's just going to be, kind of messy.
Yeah, you could wind up, I mean, say he sits on the Kings bench for a couple of months and then you trade him midway through the season and you get a couple of good months out of him. It could just be the honeymoon effect, right? Where he's on his best behavior.
Yeah.
You trade for him, he looks good, you pay him, and then next thing you know, you're kind of stuck with him and he's not that good anymore. That could happen. But like, the draft capital is there. People thought it was a bit of a stretch when the Kings took him in the draft, but still, like, he was a quality easy lottery pick, right? Like, that's the type of gamble that you take in a trade. But again, what are the Kings going to get for him now? Like, if they really want to trade him, you play him. You don't say anything about this. You talk about his development. You try to put him in advantageous situations. And in a few weeks, you see what's out there on the market in a deal for him. Or if not, you trade him last summer. I get that. But then again, are the Kings going to deal with any client from this agency from here on out now that this has happened? So it's an interesting look for both sides. And by interesting, I mean probably bad, probably a bad look for both sides here. And I have no idea how this is going to get resolved.
Now, what I will say is it's not that the Kings have never given this guy opportunities.
Oh, no, they have.
So as a rookie, it was a messy roster construction, so I get it. But he played in 62 games, only 4 starts, but he played 25 minutes a game. Not bad for a rookie. Then in his second year, he's basically hurt for most of the season, was out. His third year last season, he played in 43 games with 42 starts before getting injured again. His numbers really weren't that bad. 50% from the field, 34% from three. He was free throw shooting was awful. I don't know what happened there, but 14 points, seven rebounds a game. Defense is never going to probably be his strength. It's just not who he is at this point. But every year he's averaged 14 and 7 basically from the field. Every year he's been at least those markers. That's someone who can play. Like, this is not a complete waste of a player who's doing anything. And people will say it's empty stats because it's on bad Kings teams or whatever. But again, this is not. He's not shooting 38% and scoring 14 points on 20 attempts a night. That's not this. This is just a big who can do some stuff. So so I just feel like this is one where you kind of want to tell both sides. I mean, and look, I think it's absolutely funny that I got to this point, but you want to tell both sides, all right, it's time to grow up now and let's just move along.
Exactly. Both sides need to move on. I mean, look, if you're the Kings and you can go out there and you can sign Alex Len, pretty clear that you're going to be playing him over your former lottery pick in Marvin Bagley.
Well, Alex Len or any one of 15 centers on that roster as they continue, as they rival Cleveland for the absolute tallest team in the league.
Anytime you can sign a journeyman big off the free agent market and completely devalue your former lottery pick, you have to do it. You have to if you're the Kings. You have to make that move.
100%. Sure. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to big men that get paid, oddly enough. Let's do Daniel Gafford first. Washington Wizards. So if you remember, we talked about Terrence Mann probably about a week or so ago. He signed an extension where it was a little unique because what the Clippers did was they picked up a team option for him for next season, the 2022-23 season, and then they added 2 years onto it. Well, the Wizards took it a little bit of a step further, and they added 3 years, added a little over $40 million on there. So he'll be on the books next season at $1.9 million. Then that'll jump up to 12.4, 13.4, and then it'll close at 14.4 in 25-26. All 3 seasons fully guaranteed, no options in there, no bonuses or anything. So that is what the deal is, and that feels like pretty good money for Daniel Gafford. But it actually feels like if he plays the way he did after the Wizards got him in that trade, that's really solid value because that's going to be right around just a touch more than mid-level money, especially in those outer years. And I think that's huge for the Wizards because you have a starting level big man for what's mid-level replacement level money. And I think that's really big.
Yeah. I think that's just fine with the deal. I think it's a smart one by the Wizards. This is a guy who looked very good, looked like a steal in the deal they got him from the Chicago Bulls. And so far, I mean, I think this is just a very reasonable contract across the board. And I've always said you want to pay a player for what he's going to do, not what he has done. Try to project out what you think he's going to be. And if Gafford turns into what the Wizards think he's going to be, which is a very solid starting caliber big, this is a good value.
Well, yeah. And just with Washington, I just pulled it up. He played 17.7 minutes per game. So a little bit more than he'd been playing with Chicago in his first season and a half, but 10 points, 1.8 blocks per game, 5.6 rebounds, and he shot 68.1%. I mean, his range is measured in inches, not feet.
It's all dunks.
Everything's around the hoop. But yeah, but I think it's, that's good stuff. And this is a team that they're a little weird with their roster construction right now because they've also got Montrezl Harrell. We'll see if Thomas Bryant, if and when he gets back this season, probably, if anything, will probably be around the midseason mark up front. And then they've got a bunch of guys who are probably more power forwards than anything else. And Hachimura, Bertans, Denny Avdia is starting to look maybe a little power forwardish on this group. But I think they've done a good job locking in a talented young player on a very reasonable deal.
Agreed. Let's move on to another big man. Jonas Valanciunas,
Yeah.
2 years, $30 million with the New Orleans Pelicans, gets that extension done. I mean, solid deal. Look, this is one of the better offensive centers in the NBA. Very, very efficient.
Yep.
Not always a pretty game, more of a power game, but locks into a 2-year deal. I mean, the only curious thing here is they took a lot of flack for giving Steven Adams the contract they did, and then they kind of turned around and gave Valanciunas Steven Adams level money, give or take a couple of million. But still, I think it's a solid deal for a big man that admittedly I'm a fan of. I really enjoy his game, just being that kind of throwback brute force center.
Yeah, next year he'll be on the books for about 14.7-ish million, it looks like. That's actually, believe it or not, that is over 3.2 million under what Adams makes next year. So that's actually that's a meaningful amount of money. Just kind of another fun little note. They have exactly one free agent now planned for next year, and that's Tomas Satoransky. Everybody else is signed and under contract, and then they have Josh Hart on that very uniquely structured deal where it's got non-guarantees and a non-guarantee with a player option, which is very rare in its final year. But yeah, I think this is perfectly fine for the Pelicans. Valanciunas is 29 now. I think he's a guy who should age well because he's never been relying on his athleticism. He's always been a pretty ground-bound guy. But I think with the way he has added range to his game, in that's really going to help. I think he's somebody, we don't do a ton of this, but if you're a fantasy basketball player, go get him while Zion's out because I think he's going to eat inside. Yeah. I think he's going to get the ball and do a lot of stuff.
I do have him on my team
for this team. There you go. See, you and I've never said that, so I can't even take credit for that.
That's
one.
Right.
But it's I think this is a good deal for the Pelicans. I think this is a smart move. Now, what this says to me though is this one: Gafford, Malcolm Brogdon, all of the guys who signed rookie scale extensions. The free agent class next summer is awful.
Yes.
We thought this year was bad. Next year, it's like Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal, and a whole bunch of whatever. Now,
I mean, that's a pretty good top two there, though. I mean, Zach LaVine and Bradley Beal.
Really good top two, but
chances are they
drops
probably stay. Yeah,
very starkly after those guys. Now, we coined last summer Summer of the Trade Part 2, or Summer of the Trade. So this summer, we're going to have to call it Summer of the Trade Part 2. Or the redo or something fun like that, because I think that's just what's going to happen now. I think players are now in the mindset of get the money when you can.
Yep.
There are definitely times when it makes more sense to go to free agency for some guys because of just where they're at contractually. But if you have the chance to get what you think is roughly your value in the offseason, go get the money then and get done. So it's going to be messy in free agency just because there's not a lot of guys. Now, there's also not going to be a bunch of teams with cap space because teams have done this. They've locked guys up. But yeah, it's going to be something to keep an eye on here because right now, extending and taking money a year or two out is really starting to become more of the norm around the league.
Yeah, I mean, well, teams are looking at it too, and they're saying, well, there's nobody really to spend on next offseason. So why not just get this done, do our shopping right now, and then we don't have to worry about it next off season when there isn't really much out there, which makes a lot of sense. And then from the players' side, I mean, look, they're thinking, let's get this money. If we need to try to work a trade later on, we can do that. Maybe it gets really bad like Ben Simmons in that situation, but hopefully we don't go down that route and take the money while it's available. I mean, I'm picturing a back and forth between an agent and a player, like a text or something going back and forth. The agent says, I've got this team is offering this much money for this many years. The player says, well, I think I'm going to bet on myself. The agent just texts back, Dennis Schroeder. And then the player would respond, okay, I'll sign. Right? Like,
quite possibly.
That's the downside to what can happen with betting on yourself. And we've seen it now play out with not just Schroeder, but some other players as well. Sure. So, players I think are taking that cautionary tale to heart, and they're locking up money while they can.
Just as many guys as we look at and like, oh gosh, that contract looks awful after they sign it because of injuries or drop off in play or whatever it is. There's just as many guys who we can look at from the other side of it and say, boy, they should have taken that money.
Absolutely.
Well, when it was offered, because you don't know if it'll come back around. And like for a guy like Schroeder, too, is it also reads of I don't know how much long-term thinking there was done there, because this past year, very clearly, his market dried up almost
Yeah,
immediately. And then next year, there's just not a lot of teams with cap space. Now, we've seen sign and trades have become back into
sure.
vogue and they become a thing. But yeah, this could be something where this takes a couple years for him to dig back out of. But, by all accounts, his head's screwed on tight. He's ready to have a big season, and, off he goes. And he's left a little ambiguity there of how on the table that offer really
Right.
was, and whether it's he's trying to make himself look good, or the Lakers folks, clearly they would never do it publicly, but privately have even said, yeah, we didn't necessarily go to some of the numbers that have been out there. So, my guess is it's probably more true than it is not true. And just everybody's trying to save face here a little bit and look a little bit better as we move along. But yeah, speaking of the Celtics, we'll close with this one. Boston re-signed Jabari Parker. Now, this is interesting, not so much about Jabari Parker, although I remain a Jabari Parker fan. I think Jabari Parker can still play, but that's because I also still believe scoring points is the end goal of the game. And, I think that is still an important skill to have in basketball. But it's more interesting for why this happened the way it happened. So Jabari Parker signed with the Celtics late last season on a 2-year veteran minimum contract. When that happens, the player is charged at the actual salary amounts versus the league. What's the word I'm looking for, Trevor? The league kind of.
Oh, the league's veteran minimum amount. Yeah, I know what you're trying to say, but
yeah, the league basically pays the rest.
Right.
So what happens is the player gets charged at the 2-year veteran minimum amount, and then the league pays the rest of that to the player. And the cap hit for the team, and in this case for the Celtics, more importantly, the tax hit is only the 2-year veteran minimum amount. So this year, that's $1.7 million.
The league subsidizes it. That's the word we were looking for.
Subsidizes. That's what I couldn't come up with that word, man. You know what it is? It's because we were up late last night and I was up early. The coffee is now worn off. If you watched, I was all full of energy this morning.
You were.
And now I'm looking for my afternoon nap. But anyway, so Parker was on the books for over $2 million. So what the Celtics did here by waiving him and re-signing him, they've lowered that cap and tax it by about $500,000. And what that actually does is now they're about $6.3 million over the luxury tax line, which puts them in range of one trade can get them completely out of the tax if they need to. If that's a concern as the season goes along, or let's just say, and we don't know this to be certain, but let's say ownership gave Brad Stevens all right, we'll go up to 10 million over the tax. You gave yourself a little bit more wiggle room in that situation too. So this is just kind of, it's a minor thing, but it's a smart move, and it doesn't actually change anything for Jabari Parker salary wise, because he still gets the same amount of money he was going to get anyway.
It's just coming partially from the NBA.
It's just coming from the NBA versus from the Celtics. And what it does do, though, is the Celtics ownership group gets to save $500,000 towards the tax, which is, that's not nothing for, when you're trying to keep a long range and short range of view in mind here. Golden State Warriors, very similar situation with Gary Payton II, also in the last couple of days.
Yes, exactly. And look, from the outsider's perspective, you see that transaction and you go, what the heck? They just waived this guy. Now they re-sign him. Yeah. Why? It's just smart management. That's it. That's it. It's just jumping through the hoops of the NBA and making things work from a money perspective. And so, yeah, it's just a smart move by the Celtics and no reason not to do what they did here.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for the news and notes. Go check out our other show, our daily wrap-up show that we're starting. Go check that out. Give us your thoughts on that. Let us know what you thought about how it went. Keep in mind, that was the first one, and it looked a little different because there was only the two games last night. We're check in tomorrow's show after a full night of games. You'll have a better sense of what we're trying to accomplish with that show. And please chime in with what you think we should call that daily wrap-up show. You'll still find it here on the Front Office feed, both on YouTube and the podcast version, wherever you listen to the podcast. They're all going to be in the same place. You're just getting some bonus content because beyond transactions and cap sheets and all that, we wanted to actually talk about real basketball games too. So we're giving this a shot to see where it all goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So give us your thoughts. Give us your feedback as well in the comments section down below. And again, watch that previous video. going over the games from last night, and tomorrow's will be much more rapid fire because there's going to be a lot more games to get through. All right, everybody, make sure you follow Keith on Twitter at KeithSmithNBA. You can find me at Trevor_Lane. You can find me on Instagram at TrevorLaneNBA. Hit that subscribe button right here at the NBA Front Office YouTube channel and turn on notifications as well. Till next time, see ya and stay safe.